Right now, Yemen's facing a multitude of challenges, three big interconnected challenges: economic, demographic, and domestic security. All three of these are connected, and their impact, one worsening impacts the others. Economic, the country's quickly running out of money and natural resources. Demographic, it's the Arab world's poorest country, fastest growing country, the increasingly poorer country. And domestic security, the country is facing three big insurgencies right now. There's a separatist movement in the south, a civil war, an active civil war in the north, in Sada, and the reemergence of a rejuvenated Al-Qaeda organization. The problems that Yemen's facing are, very likely not just going to affect Yemen, but going to affect the entire region. And Yemen's a critically important country. It's right next door to the world's largest oil producer. Over 3 million barrels of oil a day go by off the coast of Yemen every day through waters where Islamist terrorists and others, most recently pirates, have successfully targeted international shipping, international warships, etc. I think there's a real fear that instability in Yemen will affect other regional countries. In April of this year, the Saudis announced that they had captured 11 militants trying to infiltrate from Yemen with equipment for some 30 suicide vests, which is really troubling. There have been repeated arms seizures along the border, and most recently there was a failed assassination attempt against Prince Mohammed bin Naif, the Saudi Deputy Minister of Interior, the Saudi official responsible for counterterrorism, the individual who's led the kingdom's fight against Al-Qaeda. This assassination attempt was conducted by a Saudi national who fled from Saudi Arabia to Yemen, and he left from Yemen to come back to Saudi Arabia in this bombing. And the organization, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, resurgent Al-Qaeda in the region, has claimed responsibility for the attack. And this is just the most recent manifestation that we've seen of instability and a deteriorating security situation in Yemen affecting the region. This is only going to get worse as time goes on, and the economic effects will also be very bad. There's no way that Yemen can absorb all of the labor. There's no way that Yemen can employ everybody in Yemen who needs jobs. These people will need to go abroad to find jobs, or need to go to the Gulf. And there will need to be a way for regional countries to start to absorb Yemeni labor. And that's going to be a big challenge going forward. After Afghanistan and Pakistan, Yemen's probably the most important international problem coming up for the United States. When you think about American national security interests, terrorism, access to hydrocarbons, regional instability, Yemen's got all of those things coming together. In January this year, the Al-Qaeda affiliates in Saudi Arabia and Yemen merged into one larger regional organization. And over the past couple of years, we've seen Saudi militants take refuge in Yemen, and now we see this organization that's threatening to target not just American or Yemeni interests, but Saudi and regional interests. And if you look at how the Saudi government has fought terrorism, they've made it a much less conducive environment for militants and extremists. What the Saudi government was able to do, the Yemeni government is currently not able to do. So the Saudi government is a strong central government with a lot of resources, with religious and other legitimacy and credibility. All those things are lacking right now in Yemen. And what we see is a situation where Al-Qaeda is going to be able to use this space to plot and plan and prepare attacks against Western and other targets. As conditions get worse in Yemen, and as the Yemeni government is unable to fully control the territory in Yemen, there's a real fear that Al-Qaeda affiliated, inspired organizations will make use of that undergoverned space to plot, plan, prepare, train, to launch attacks against American interests, Western interests, and regional interests. The conflict in the north in Sada has been going on for the last 4 or 5 years. Just recently flared up again into open hostilities, and this conflict goes back and has lots of kind of origins, from economic grievance, from lack of investment, from religious and sectarian and tribal animosities. It started out as a conflict about a group of Zaidi revivalists, sort of Shia revivalists, feeling disenfranchised, and it's spread now to have these very dangerous tribal overtones. One of the big problems going on in Yemen right now is that the Yemeni government has a very limited capacity to deal with multiple problems. So what we've seen over the last half year is that the Yemeni government gets very preoccupied with one problem. First it was southern secessionism, now it's this war in Sada. And the big concern is that the government's attention gets diverted entirely on one issue and they can't deal with other issues, like Islamic terrorism, like the economy, like the end of oil or the end of water. And one of the big fears is that because the Yemeni government has not been able to decisively put down this insurrection, it emboldens other actors to take advantage of the government being distracted by this massive war in Sada. The government of Yemen earns about 75 to 80% of its income through the sale of hydrocarbons. Oil is quickly running out, and there's been little to no planning, serious planning given to what a post-oil economy would look like. So 5 years ago, say, the government was producing maybe 450,000 barrels per day. Now it's probably 180,000 barrels per day, which means that the government's foreign income has dropped off, probably 75%. Meanwhile, expenditures continue to go up. Most of the economy, most of the spending goes to cover salaries, pensions, and other benefits, things that you can't cut, like subsidies for refined petroleum products. The way things work in Yemen is that the country is held together by money from the central government going out to governorates. When there's no more money coming in, there's no more holding the country together, and that's the big fear. In 5 years or so, there will be no more oil, and there will be no more hard currency coming in. Resource depletion in Yemen is a huge problem. If oil is a bad situation, water is even worse. Every year the water table falls more and more. Most of Yemen's water is drawn from non-renewable underground aquifers. And as the water gets extracted, the water quality gets worse and worse. So it's estimated that Yemen will have 40 million people, population will double in 20 years. Meanwhile, water is running out more and more. Most likely, the capital, Sana'a, will be the first capital in modern history to go dry, at which point the government will have to either relocate the capital, relocate massive amounts of people, or come up with some way to conserve water. God is this mild narcotic stimulant that's chewed by most Yemeni men. Most of the morning is spent looking for God, deciding where you're going to chew, and most of the afternoon is spent chewing God and socializing. Just about every social interaction in Yemen revolves around God chews. Much of the water in Yemen goes to irrigate God production. And God production expands every year. One of the problems is that there's no incentive to conserve water when you're irrigating God. The recent food crisis hit Yemen especially hard. So when prices rose, Yemen was especially hit. And there's been research to show that the average Yemeni family gave up eating instead of spending on God. So you see that many family members, were eating one meal a day. Caloric consumption went down. Many people weren't eating meat. People were taking extra jobs to earn money. And, the levels of malnutrition kind of skyrocketed. And even though the crisis has eased somewhat, in the next 3 or 4 years, when it comes back, it'll be even more devastating to Yemen. The central government in Yemen is dealing with an awful lot of problems, an awful lot of multifaceted challenges, and each one of these challenges is interconnected to other challenges going on. I think right now the Yemeni government is probably doing the best it can managing and holding the situation together. However, when one of these problems becomes exacerbated, there will be problems in other areas. So when the economy gets worse, social welfare provision gets worse. When domestic security gets bad, the economy gets worse. All of these situations are tied together. Right now, the government, exerts real control, probably in large urban areas, and that's where it focuses its attention. As a result, there are large portions of the country, that receive less to little government attention, and that's a major concern looking forward. One of the plans that the government that the Yemeni government is looking going forward is how to address the idea that most of the countries beyond the control of the central government. One of the ideas that the Yemeni government has is to sort of de facto recognize that much of the country is beyond central government control and devolve control to local governance. Basically saying to local regions, you're responsible for what happens. You build the roads and the hospitals, set the priorities. We're going to tell you what you should do. You come up with the money to do it. This makes little to no sense in a situation where the government has no control to just say, we'll give it all away. So thinking forward, the Yemeni government's idea of decentralization doesn't make much sense when what you want to do is expand government control, expand the provision of social services, expand the government's presence, not cede control. For the American government, Yemen is probably not a first-order priority right now, given everything else that's going on in the world. 2 wars, economic meltdown, Iran, North Korea, Middle East peace process, healthcare, everything else. I can understand that Yemen is very far down on the list of to-do items. However, very quickly, Yemen's going to rise to the top of the list, and in a very bad way. And recognizing that Yemen is going to be a problem in the future, it's urgent that the international community and the United States and others take action to address some of Yemen's problems before it becomes a point of no return. When thinking about the problems posed by Yemen, there's not an American solution or a European solution or a regional solution. I mean, there's an international solution. This is how Yemen has to be dealt with. The international community has to come together with regional countries, to address these problems, because one country can't do it by itself. The Saudis can't do it alone. The Americans can't do it alone. When American officials talk about kind of priorities and concerns, so far it's been all about security and counterterrorism. That's what the relationship between Washington and Sana'a has been all about. And when you do that, you exclude a whole lot of other issues that need to be talked about, that need to be addressed. At the same time, the Americans talk about Yemen as a priority, kind of second only to Afghanistan and Pakistan. While Pakistan receives about $1 billion a year in assistance, Yemen's received about $20 million a year. That's less than $1 per Yemeni, which is kind of shocking when we think about what the impact of Yemen going off the rails is really going to look like. So the next budget request, the foreign assistance request has gone up to about $60 million. A lot of this also will include security assistance. But still, the humanitarian assistance and the development assistance is outweighed by security assistance, and that needs to change.